You see, these are some important times in Sikh history, right? And this is, say, there's a lot of socio-political, you all know that, you're students of that, isn't it? What happened is, it will be of great interest, or maybe some note, that the generation which I met, born between 1900 and 12, had a full cup. And the ones born from 13, 14 onwards had this much. And afterwards, it's either this or this. Drastic, very big change. What does it reflect? That during this time, post 1912, the ancient educative processes which had thrived for centuries and centuries and centuries suddenly were disrupted. And all that was happening in India, in South Asia, impacted directly to that. There could have been a change, there could have been a revival. Because, for example, at the turn, in 95, one of the last of that generation who was born in 1900 and lived until 95, Bhai Singh Tarangad. So he was still a storyteller for 95 of these years. But most of them died by the 80s. Understandably, they would have been 80-year-olds. Right? The partition occurs. And Punjab is one geographical area which lost the greatest. Tamil Nadu didn't have anything like that. Karnataka didn't face that. Yeah. Bengal didn't face, because what was done? Culturally, it was only East India Company, basically. And what happened? East India Company, when the British took over the Mughals, Mughal India, people, it's a misnomer that British ruled India. Within the India, there was the Mughal India, let's say here, which the British took over in 18. Rest were kingdoms which they had treaties with. They were buddies. Maharaja Patiala was a buddy of King George V. They would go hunting. So there was an Indian India, and the other is the Mughal India. So what happened when the Mughal India broke, Mughal Empire in 1857, when the British, the so-called Indian Mutiny afterwards, which the British take over Delhi, the musicians from here spread out because the court was disbanded. They were court musicians. So principalities like Rampur, Gwalior and Calcutta, because that's where the big zamindars with the British, the trade was being commanded. So they went here. And that's also the tragedy. So when 47, post 47 literature on music is basically the history of Rampur, Gwalior, Calcutta and Delhi. They forget that music happened here. When this happened, Pai Kalu Rababi, a Muslim singer of Gurbani from Anandpur, was killed by the members of his own community because he sang Gurbani all his life on the banks of a canal on way to Pakistan. Because the whole thing was, it's ethnic, immigration. The Muslims must go to Pakistan, and Hindus and Sikhs and others are to remain in India. So when we talk of what all happened, this was the final, assault on the whole continuity of that. So there are major reasons why we can. It's very complicated to understand what happened. And Gurdwaras, you can imagine a Akal Takht Jathedar, you know, Akal Takht, which is the highest temporal seat of the Sikhs. The head of this is like the Pope. What is Pope to Catholics? The Akal Takht head is similar, not exactly same, but is something similar to the Sikhs. During the British, last years of the British, when they were all British so-called agents, anthropologists. He writes to the Queen Victoria, he signs a letter, says, "Thy humble servant." It's open records, you can read it. Now, head of a Sikh, Akal Takht Jathedar, writing as thy humble servant, you can imagine what had become, what did the Gurudwaras take care of? You understand? So it's very complex. Now today, in the Gurdwaras, there is nothing. Sadly, two families. Sadly. My family, the family name is Sambi. My ancestor was Sadharan Sambi, who built the 84 steps Bauli for Guru Amar Das. That's his name. Sadharan means common. Commoner. Beautiful name. Okay? And the other is Matharus, which is the Namdhari. You saw those Namdhari guys sitting next to the water source. That is the name of the Gurus, the family name of that clan. Sadly, among the Sikhs are two clans who retained the original music. All others went over a few decades. So you can see in the Gurdwaras what exists. Yes, as long as Bhai Avtar Singh sang in the Gurdwara, but he's not a producer of a Gurdwara, you see. So Gurdwara is a place where Ragis get a job to sing, to perform. But they are not produced of a Gurdwara. Gurdwara is not an institution which produces, it's not a conservatory. They're not places of learning anymore. And around the Golden Temple, you see, this is the pond. If this is the Golden Temple, again, by grace of the Gurus, built by my ancestors, there was places of learning. You could learn scriptures, you could have music, and so on and so forth. Religions. There were taksas, there were places of learning for all forms of, all udasis had their own places. So in about 10, 15, 20 years, you knew all the scriptures that existed. They're all gone now. None of them exists. They're dead. And all these places are locked now. Post 1980s. And of course, but the learnings had already died. There were empty places which were put to use and misuse. And abuse even. You see, so the study, it's a very complex. You have to take into account all of this when we study Guru's heritage.